Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.
NSRCEL SummitUp, brought to you by Capgemini. NSRCEL's two-day SummitUp conference was recently held at IIM Bangalore. The event brought together entrepreneurs, government officials, academics, and investors to discuss key issues around entrepreneurship. The event witnessed over 350 guests and participants engaging in thought-provoking discussions with keynote speeches, fireside chats, special presentations, and more.
What is it that drives your most intrinsic motivations in the current environment? What is it you're really trying to accomplish? What are your drivers? What is it you want to hit at scale? And over the next couple of days, we will unpack many of these questions. The weather department, I am told, is predicting a cool, wet couple of days. I do hope for all of us here, the next 2 days is going to be hot and happening. Welcome to SummitUp.
CEO of Cult.fit, Mukesh Bansal started the event addressing passionate entrepreneurs on the theme Caveat Entrepreneurship and how startups can navigate the next 12 months of their businesses.
So I've been now, fortunately been around entrepreneurial environment for last 25 years. My first job as a business analyst with Deloitte Consulting Chicago. I didn't really like that job. So in 1999, at the heyday of dot-com boom, I decided to quit my job, move to Silicon Valley and try to start a company. I was 23-year-old at that time and honestly had no clue, what startup is and how to go about doing one. Since then, I worked for 4 startups in Silicon Valley for 8 years. Moved to India in 2007, was part of Myntra for 9 years, last 7 years, CureFit. So startups, is what I know. I think pretty much most of my professional career has been around this. 2 very big reflection of that. One is startups are very, deeply interlinked, with some macro business cycles. I think a lot of, since we are in the business school setting, I'm guessing we all understand that, business cycles are part and parcel of, just how the overall economic system works. And startups, have to be very, cognizant of that. So how we'll play next, 12 to 24 months, we need to step back and think in the context of larger picture of business cycles. So going back to my journey, I think I've seen 5 distinct business cycles. So I reached Silicon Valley when it was the heyday of dot-com boom. People were at the time talking about that the world is going to change forever. A lot of dot-com companies at the time were which were hardly 5-year-old were valued more than some of the organizations which were around for 50 or 100 years. So it was the hype was that crazy, and then the burst happened in 2000, right? And then which lasted for 3-4 years. Things were very gloomy in Silicon Valley. In 2001, 2, all the traffic dried up. There were no jobs to be found. Then similarly in 2007, 8, a lot of you probably remember the financial crisis. That's the time I moved back to India again because of that. There was a lot of doom and gloom. So 2013, for various macroeconomic factors, the overall, big picture story of India was not looking good. And suddenly in that year, all the foreign direct investment crawled to a halt. People were not touching startup. And that happened to be a year where Myntra was also, running very low on cash. So that was my third, kind of business cycle. Fourth was 2016-17. There were a lot of excesses happened 2014-15. That's the first time, we started to see all these unicorns being formed. Flipkart, went from $1 billion valuation to 10 billion plus in less than 2 years. Many others followed suit, and then people started asking questions about where are the exits. How will these valuations will ever be justified? They went back from 16 billion valuation to 10 billion. Major haircut for a lot of investors, but they eventually came out of that. And of course, the 5th crisis, pandemic, which again I was, I had to face the heat because we were running at CureFit, business which was largely offline, and then pandemic happens, and all of a sudden all the fitness and the shutdown, revenue goes from 100 to 0, and we have to really think about whether we'll even survive this period. At that time, obviously, no one knew how long the pandemic will last. So point I'm trying to make is crisis and downturns are nothing new. If anyone who's any interest in economic history and study business cycles, you will notice that it happens all the time. The cycles may last anywhere from 4 years to 8 years, and that's also rough guidelines. No one can really predict, how long a business cycle will last. Sometimes it lasts a lot longer, sometimes a lot shorter. But then eventually, pandemic got over, life resumed normally. The stuff people were consuming, at home, digitally stopped, and all the growth had disappeared. And obviously, the investor took a backseat. Around the same time, the central banks also started to pay attention to, because of the easy money, inflation started to skyrocket, and inflation has a, deep long-term adverse effects. So people started tighten the monetary policy as well. So there's a very strong self-selection that happens in bad years versus, let's say, extremely good go-go years, right? So one is, the cleanup of the system happens. Second, the good startups realize that they need to be way more prudent about how they are using the capital they have raised. I think all the things we are, hearing about, India hype, I believe in it. I think it's, sometime we may overdo it, but if you step back, I think the India opportunity for next 20-25 years is probably one of the best or the best in the world globally. I think we will see Indian economy go from $3 trillion to $15 trillion over next, 20 years or so, which is a humongous value creation.
The event continued with a panel discussion moderated by Professor Dalia Mani from IIM Bangalore. The topic of the discussion was Women Innovators, what sets them apart? Excerpts from different verticals discuss the role of women innovators in different sectors.
If you could describe, each of you, what was a pivotal moment in your ventures journey?
When I was sort of starting to think about launching Campus Fund, I actually didn't know how the venture capital industry worked, right? And I reached out to angels of Goodera, earlier investors of Goodera, and just asked them that this is something that I want to build, will you help me, right? And they just supported wholeheartedly, right? Without a qualm, without a question. They said, we'll help you in any which way we can. And all of them said, that we'll stand by you, we'll open our network for you, and we'll help build this fund, right? And that is what actually was a turning point. We started off with a pilot fund of $1 million, in 2020, in complete lockdown, COVID, everything happened virtually. And now we are a 100 crore fund registered with SEBI, right? So, there are women like Soumya Rajan who said that I will stand by you, go ahead and do it, right? And that is what you need as an entrepreneur. That's the most valuable thing that could have happened, and I'm eternally grateful, for all the folks who came in to support. So that was sort of the turning point, helping me to sort of take that plunge.
Being in the tech industry or being in the investment industry, I realized that the gap in funding for women entrepreneurship. And just by being part of so many kind of meetings or experiences, I realized that women were not getting a playing field, right? And I spoke to so many women entrepreneurs. I spoke to a lot of people who were in the investing side as well. And just realizing that there was such a gap in awareness also of why it's so important, of course, for women founders and leaders to be there, but also why it's important to build for women. PCOS or menopause is a very natural part of our life, but we're building for it now only, and there's a long way to go, right? And I realized that all these things were a function of the fact that leadership or decisions were not being taken by more women in the room. I said, okay, I want to start this fund, I want to raise money, and I'm going to now start this journey. And I obviously, through our network or through online, saw who the top, women of India, right? And I said, okay, I want to go and meet all these women in that list. And very luckily, of course, I met Mrs. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw or Zia Modi. And when I went and met them and I told them about what I want to do, and they were like, this is amazing, because when we were starting our businesses or when we were starting off, there was nobody like this, right? So like Mrs. Shaw shared with me how when she wanted to start her business, she went for a loan, and nobody gave her a loan until her father took the loan and she was the co-applicant. And then she got the loan, right? And so to hear these stories, and to get that kind of support was truly inspirational.
So Sneha, if you could go back in time, yeah, and meet yourself when you were about to start your company or start this journey as an entrepreneur, what would you tell your younger self?
I truly believe that as much as you're investing in the growth of your company, I think by equal measure, it's important that we invest in understanding ourselves. So I think self-awareness as a founder specifically is so important because all of us have come with certain baggage, certain insecurities, things that, we may know our strengths, and it's also equally important to understand that, we're not perfect. And that's perfectly fine, right? Like, that's absolutely fine. We don't necessarily have to portray this sort of very alpha image. And especially, I think, with women, it can get very confusing because it's a very male-dominated space. It's really important that we are okay being ourselves. We don't have to be like this sort of put up this macho alpha, sort of, perception, in front of the world. I really think that embracing our vulnerabilities, talking about it, being open and saying that, hey, I don't have the answer, having folks in your team being able to sort of come up with an answer better than you, you need to be able to, feel a sense of security, about yourself to be able to sort of embrace all of those things. I don't think there's anything that I've experienced in life that has taught me so much as entrepreneurship has. I think this has been my school of life, I think. Forget about business. I think it's been a school of life for me. So that's my take.
It's okay to be vulnerable because that shows the authentic you. So it's okay to be vulnerable in front of your team, in front of whosoever you're speaking with. And the third thing is, after multiple no's is what comes the real yes. So what I'm trying to say here is that as an entrepreneur or somebody who's trying to build something, I feel that there is a beauty in the no's that come to you, right? They help you evolve yourself, become a better version of your own self. And then you probably enjoy the yes in a better way, right? So, it's an art to appreciate the no's, and I think we all should embrace that. So these are my 3 things that I'd go back and say to myself.
It's really important to learn, like she said, that there are going to be so many no's, there are going to be so many pivots. Things change really fast in today's world. So to be ready to fail, but learn from that, right? And those biggest learnings come from failure. And the same way we celebrate success, it's okay to talk about your failures because you need to discuss them and get feedback and learnings from people. So I think normalizing failure also, which I learned over time.
NSRCEL SummitUp, brought to you by Capgemini. NSRCEL SummitUp, brought to you by Capgemini. SummitUp explored entrepreneurship, incubation ecosystem, and creating change at scale. Day 2 began with an inspiring keynote by K. Ganesh, founder of Growth Story, who discussed the why and why not of entrepreneurship and achieving impact at scale. Attendees enjoyed a holistic and global perspective on entrepreneurship at SummitUp.
I started my entrepreneurship journey back in 1990, so 32 years of entrepreneurship before venture capitalists, valuations, unicorns, exits, any of it was there. And obviously the question always has been, should you or should you not do entrepreneurship? Why are we doing this? And the way Indian corporate industry has grown, the salaries have grown, what people get at day 0 salary, day 1 salary, it's always a tough choice to do it. Having said that, everybody that I have met in corporate, their dream is to be on their own, to start entrepreneurship. So we'll talk a bit about entrepreneurship, why and why not, and look at how the startup ecosystem is. We always feel that if you're an entrepreneur, you're your own boss. But I can tell you with 32 years of entrepreneurship, okay, right? That's actually the worst reason. If you're an entrepreneur, everybody else except you is your boss, okay, right? Every time the phone rings, every time the customer wants to speak, okay, you have pangs of heart attack, okay, right? So, and if you're in a B2B business, it's even worse. A large contract. Whenever the contract comes for renewal, again you get pangs of it, okay, right? Everybody, right? And similarly, when you come in the morning, if one of your employees says, I want to meet you. Okay, that's a nightmare. Okay, right? Okay, right? That's a nightmare. Now it happens in WhatsApp. So every time a message comes like, I want to talk to you. Okay, right? Because if it's about something else, they will actually say that, they will state it in the WhatsApp, right? The only reason they want to talk to you is because it's not good news, okay, right? So there are a lot of it. So everybody is the boss, right from the employee to customer to vendor to anybody. And I don't know how many of you, at least I have realized this. In the night when you're sleeping is when all the problems gets magnified multifold times, okay, right? When I get up in the morning, I'm still happy. I'm still able to, with difficulty, smile and face the problems. You need to be passionate and you need to be stupid to be an entrepreneur. Otherwise, there's no logic. The chances of success in entrepreneurship, percentage-wise, is so small. My biggest kick out of all the ventures that I've done, every time I do a venture, is when the first order comes, first check comes, okay? And my first business, most of the time was spent in saying, should an order book look? Should it be vertical or horizontal, the columns in an order book, okay, right? So that's all done, okay, right? But some of the challenges, all of you have faced it, are facing it every day that is there, okay, right? So the amount of mental toll it takes on the entrepreneur to ensure that the business is able to pay salaries is important. Somebody said, profit, EBITDA, all of that doesn't matter. Entrepreneur first works on cash flow. If the end of the month, you have enough cash to pay your expenses, pay your employees, pay your salaries, you are up, about, happy. You don't have it, it doesn't matter. We have seen these waves, tectonic shifts in technology, developments that really created each of these businesses. So then next wave started this entire concept of from India for the world. Okay, right? Global SaaS started. It really took on. Right? Then COVID hit. Okay, right? Again, the huge challenge for the industry. But now we are seeing post-COVID resurgence. Most of the sectors have come out very, very strong and scaling brilliantly. So the message here is, for you and me as entrepreneurs, this evolution will keep happening. You will have ups and downs. Every time there is, as an entrepreneur, there is an opportunity for us to catch something and ride that particular wave. Whether you call it disruption, whether you call it transformation, that is where lies the opportunity. Now it is digital infrastructure and digital public infrastructure like UPI, ONDC, and various initiatives that what they call as India Stack has built up. So we can use the digital public infrastructure, leverage on top of it, both what it is already there today. If you look at Aadhaar, look at eKYC, each one of this is an opportunity on which we can scale and build large, great businesses which we can do. So in short, technology, disruption, ability to leverage platforms, ability to leverage digital public infrastructure, all of this presents a great, great opportunity for us going forward.
The event continued with a panel discussion on fundraising in current economic climate.
What do you think would be a good profile of a startup that is ready for your capital?
What we're looking for is, are you solving a large enough problem? And large enough as, is this going to be a business which can scale if you solve the problem? Second, do you have a way of solving the problem which is more meaningful than other ways of solving the problem to the consumer? And these are what is going to make or break the investment that we do.
By definition, I expect a 40% default rate in any portfolio, right? So when you have these two things combined, 25% rate of return that you have to give, and 40% default. Remember, banks go bust if they do more than 4% rates of default in a loan portfolio, right? So if you combine these two, you have a very small chunk of businesses that can be funded, and that chunk is something that has very high returns and a very disruptive business models. When you take on something that's an existing business and break it apart, and something new comes in, typically with technology, and you're able to create a completely new game. That's the small space that we have. That's what VC is good for.
You had a question? Yeah.
So my question to both the investors is, in the recent study, in one of the reports what I studied is 60% of women entrepreneurs have faced at least one question about the commitments, whereas with men it's only 40%. What's your comment on that?
47% of our founders in Fund 1 and Fund 2 are women. Okay? So I think it's about how we read the founders and how we think they can really do something interesting, and some intuition around the founders is what makes it work for us. But going to the other side, not entirely your side, but a little bit to our side, we have been trying to think of how to get more women coming into our investing team, and it's not easy, right? The industry does have very few women who are investing professionals, and I'm not sure what the issue is. And maybe it's because it's Bangalore, not Mumbai. Maybe if you're in Mumbai, that problem is easier to solve. I'm not very sure, but we wanted to get to hire a principal, and we said this time it's got to be a woman. That search just took a much, much longer time. I must have met at least 30, 40 women before I found somebody that I felt I was comfortable with, who would really, really be able to come on board and bring in a lot of value. So that is, in my view, a paucity of women talent in the VC industry.
SummitUp had a great participation this year from various stakeholders and ended on a high note, leaving the entrepreneurs more inspired for their own journey ahead. NSRCEL SummitUp, brought to you by Capgemini.
Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.